Hello and welcome back to another episode of Engaging Conversations. I'm your host, Leon Goldsman, and I want to thank you for tuning into a podcast that's all about real people, real challenges, and the kind of conversations that lead to real change. As always, a special thanks to Nias Kenneth from Invest Intelligence. A committed supporter of this program, his beliefs is the power of community, compassion, and meaningful dialogue continues to make conversations like this possible. Today's episode features someone who truly stands out in public life. It's rare to meet someone as deeply connected to their community and as courageous in calling out what's not working as Vincent De Luca OAM, a lifelong advocate and independent counsellor on Northern Beaches Council. Vincent has spent decades on the ground listening, serving and acting. From suicide prevention and drug reform to domestic violence advocacy and disability inclusion, he's been there, often before the rest of the system catches up. In this episode, Vincent shares his journey, starting from just 9 years old, with a life shaped by service, by family, and by a desire to fix what's broken. We talk about the cracks in our support systems, the barriers people face when trying to access help, and the power of persistence when change doesn't come easy. He opens up about surviving cancer, not once, but twice, the inspiring women in his life who shaped his values, and why he believes community isn't just about something you belong to, it's something you build. This episode is a reminder that impact starts with showing up. Whether that means volunteering at a local level, checking in on a neighbour, or standing up for someone who's been overlooked. So stay with us, because what Vincent shares might just shift the way you see leadership, community, and your role in making a difference.
Hello, I'm Vincent De Luca. I'm an independent counsellor on Northern Beaches Council. I've been involved in community welfare endeavours since I was 9 years of age, and so the Northern Beaches is exceptionally important to me because it's where my family, my predecessors, have made a community and formed so many community and sporting organisations. I'm also extensively involved in youth welfare, drug and alcohol prevention, suicide prevention, domestic violence prevention, and a lot of cancer research organisations. And it's been practically all my life that I've served in those capacities, and it's something that brings me great satisfaction.
I truly believe, like you, that there's nothing more satisfying than serving others. With your early work in youth welfare and co-founding the GAPS Youth Suicide Prevention Association, what inspired you to take action at such a young age? And how can the same sense of purpose help others identify and respond to the needs around them?
Anything that I've helped establish, be it Give Anything, Prevent Youth Suicide, or be it the elimination of violence against women, city to country, it's always been because I grew up at the feet of some outstanding women who I believe are icons of our nation. My late grandmother, Marjorie Smith OAM, during World War II, as well as post-World War II, was the central figure on the Northern Beaches for caring about families and kids, often who lost their loved ones at war. My mother, Rosalind De Luca OAM, has been involved in welfare and sport all her life. Nan was the founder, with other outstanding women, of Warringah Amateur Swimming Association and brought men's and women's swimming together. And Mum was a foundation member of Mundaring Netball Association, then known as basketball. So in my family, you were involved in everything that they did. So when Mum was raising money at the local hotel for women who had been abused, who some sadly were on alcohol or drugs or both. One of my earliest, fondest memories was being able to hold the meat platter at these raffles. I would have been about 6 or 7. I was dressed up in a little bow tie and I was helping with a raffle, and that's what you got used to. So I suppose it was that history that more or less led me into what I've done, and particularly when it came to suicide prevention, because Mum was involved in that and also involved with so many youth services, it was just the natural progression.
So serving the community, it's in your blood.
Yeah, well, it's not just my grandmother and my brilliant mother, but all our family. So my aunt, Pam Beckhouse OAM, she was one of the first to recognise the need for special education in schools or create special education schools, particularly at the end of the 1960s. She was a teacher's aide and sadly got diagnosed with chickenpox. And my cousin then was sadly born deaf, but also had numerous other cognitive issues and comorbidity diagnoses. So Auntie Pam was a trailblazer in ensuring that kids were not ignored, not put in cupboards like was a common scenario back in those days. If you had a disabled child, many people would keep them secret, and some were found to have been locked in cupboards. So Auntie Pam went about ensuring education services everywhere, but particularly in Canberra. So she too was awarded the Order of Australia for all her years of selfless service. So, yeah, in a family like that, you participate, you see, and you get inspired.
And it wasn't that long ago as well. We're only talking about 40, 50, 60 years ago. So it's really important. It's still very relevant to be engaging with your community.
Well, 40 and 50 years ago, engagement with the community was very different. You had, if you're a politician, you had a soapbox, and I often laugh seeing people on their soapboxes, literally, in parks. Now, we're completely different. We've got electronic means, we've got Facebook, we've got, Instagram and everything else. So it does make it easier to get out the message to certain people. But I never forget that not all people are on social media. So I still get a lot of handwritten letters, manually typed letters. And so I make sure that I go to the effort to responding to those as well, because I think it's important that you have to, as an elected representative, respond to everything. And also, often if it's a very sensitive constituent matter, I pick up the phone, I'll meet with people, and I think that's just so important for an effective elected representative. And I think I learnt that very young from, again, some brilliant women of different political persuasions. I certainly learnt a lot from the Honourable Bronwyn Bishop, AO, who, whether you love or hate her, she's one of the most responsive and I think one of the best local MPs that our area has ever had. On the other side of the political aisle, I learned a lot from the Honourable Franca Arena, the first Italian ever elected to an Australian Parliament, who had the guts to stand up in Parliament and pursue new terms of reference for the then Wood Royal Commission so that it was expanded to take in the pedophilia reference and the police's failure to actually properly investigate pedophile networks in New South Wales and indeed across Australia. And I'm so proud that the work of Franca Arena AM resulted in people being charged and convicted, and some of the people, the perpetrators, were at the highest levels of society. And then, of course, the Honourable Marie Ficarra OAM, a woman who got elected like me very young to local government. And she was in a man's world in 1979, and yet she went on to be the Mayor of Hurstville City Council and served with the distinction not just at local government. She then went into the Legislative Assembly and then is the first woman to ever go from the Legislative Assembly to the Legislative Council. And I think the common theme that all those three outstanding women taught me was care about people, always do what you think is right. And that was certainly embedded in me by my late grandmother, my mother and my aunts, and never be intimidated from standing up for what's right.
And you've been standing up for what's right from a very young age. In fact, if I'm correct, you're one of the youngest councillors to be elected.
Well, back in 99 was actually my first election campaign. I was 20. Now, back then, that council was exceptionally dysfunctional. During the election campaign in 1999, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer and given 6 weeks to live. It was a hard campaign, and the council that did get elected was subsequently dismissed, and that's very serious. There was an ICAC investigation as well. There were constant allegations in the New South Wales Parliament about that council. So yeah, I have been involved with local government since my early years. I took up the chairpersonship of Coco Youth and Community Centres Management Committee, the Warringah Council Management Committee from 1996. So I was a mere teenager. But it was an excellent experience, but it certainly made me aware of what's vested interests and how you always need people who have the courage of their convictions to stand up against the greedy and the vested interests, that's for sure.
And so you've obviously interacted with many people, especially the young people, because young people can sometimes be very impressionable. What strategies did you implement, and how can communities replicate such success to encourage youth involvement?
So encouraging youth involvement is something that's so essential in society. So when I was in high school at 14 and 15, I formed the Regional Multicultural Network. I also formed the Regional Drug and Alcohol Prevention Network and, of course, the Suicide Prevention Network. And I went on to chair the National Youth Advisory Council. So I was the vice president of the National Council, People's Council, for drug and alcohol prevention. And it was an extremely difficult role because you did see some of the worst things happen in society and so many young people affected. And that national advisory sort of role sought to develop policy to address the drug and alcohol issues plaguing society, and it's even worse today. And it is definitely something that getting younger people involved, it's, I think, important in that it actually tells you what's going on the streets, the realities of the situation, and sadly, just how some kids are sent out by their parent or parents and told, go and have fun, we're too busy for you. And I think that's one of the major things, particularly on the northern beaches. You've got a lot of people who have a lot of money and necessarily not enough care for children.
And that seems to be one of the greatest challenges, not just in the northern beaches, but everywhere. And given those challenges that you faced in this advocacy, how can individuals contribute effectively to such sensitive issues?
I think parents, guardians, aunties, uncles have to be more cognizant of what kids are both up to and going through. They need to acknowledge that unfortunately we do have drugs and alcohol in our society. We have significant mental health issues in our society. They can't be dismissed. They can't be dismissed as attention seeking, and they need to encourage kids to actually speak and come forward. And not just kids, we have a huge suicide rate in Australia involving adults as well. And I think that's mainly caused by the lack of willingness or the shame and stigma for people to come out and say, I'm having issues, would you help me? Or are you willing to talk? But also the more systemic problems that we have so few youth counsellors and youth psychiatrists, and similarly psychiatrists have recently resigned from the New South Wales Health Service because the state governments across the country are not properly paying our nurses, our mental health nurses, our midwives, our psychiatrists and our psychologists. Last year, I successfully moved a motion at council that the federal government and state government need to work together and actually look at both better salaries for all those professions that I've just named, but also consider incentives going out to country areas, providing housing, and I think that should even be in metro areas, that it's very hard, the cost of living. So I think governments of all persuasions should at the very least be offering tax exemptions, some sort of incentive to keep these such essential services in the areas that are needed.
And it does help when you've got the right support. And with your extensive network spanning politicians to sports figures, how have these connections enhanced your community initiatives? And Vincent, what can our listeners learn about leveraging their networks for positive change?
Leveraging networks is a paramount consideration. If you are trying to advocate for an issue, or you're trying to raise money for an issue or a charity or a sporting group, you do need the help of high-profile people. Fortunately, I'm blessed to have people in my corner like the great Phil Gould AM, like Liam Knight, Luke Lewis, Josh Mansour, the Trebojevic brothers, who have no hesitation in coming and supporting any charity event. TV-wise, the Packham brothers have helped me considerably with the elimination of violence against women and have attended every elimination of violence against women event. And we're able, to use them often for media, but also they put their hand in their own pockets. They agree to being auction prizes. Gina Reinhardt and Imelda Roche have attended events as well, and not just donated money, bought prizes, donated them back to refuges and safe houses. Gina even ended up an auction prize herself and gave a lunch. And it's, generous people that are the centrepiece to all the charities, and also can be great spokespeople for the issues of the day. So, there's just so many people out there who've helped along the way, and I could not have done what I have done without their support. So, network contacts and having their encouragement and backing and support is so essential. And also having parliamentary support. Sophie Kotsis, the Minister for Industrial Relations, David Harris, the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, and then on the Liberal side, Mark Speakman, Natalie Ward, the retiring member for Port Macquarie, Leslie Williams. So many of them over the years have just been so supportive, and without them, definitely, there would not be the events, the charity money going to all these refuges, safe houses, and the other charities that I'm involved in.
And it is really important to talk about these issues. One of the things about doing these programs that we do is I am very fortunate, like yourself, that I get to speak to a lot of people, and you get to hear things straight from their mouth to your ears. And I suppose what we're doing is we're amplifying that to our network and our community. So
definitely form good relationships with people who are both sporting, community and political leaders. And I suppose one of the other big things that having those contacts during the Bondi murders, as an example, a dear friend of mine was very affected because her dear daughter had been murdered. Sophie Kotsis was the first port of call to help that family. And even this week, on a suicide where assistance was needed and action in relation to the coroner, Sophie Kotsis could be relied upon to help that family. So having those sort of communication lines and having people who care as much as Sophie and David Harris and people like that and Mark Speakman certainly helps our community, and particularly in relation to representations on behalf of the community.
What I love about this conversation that we're having is that this is far beyond politics.
Look, as an independent, I am blessed to have the support of people in all political parties, but I do sincerely respect those people who genuinely care, who show that they will work hard for their communities. So to me, I don't care what party you are with, as long as you show that you are a person of integrity, are willing to pick up the phone and do the hard work. And I've seen that on all sides of the parliament. I've seen it on the crossbench, and having been in parliament for so long as a staffer, you do form brilliant relationships with people who you learn to love. And they're not necessarily people that, have your same philosophical beliefs, but you learn to love them because they're just such hard, dedicated workers for the community and selfless.
And I feel exactly the same way. There's plenty of good people on all sides of politics.
The great majority of people on all sides of politics are in there for the right reasons. It's only the few, self-interested and completely arrogant, that give all of them a bad name. And that's sad. Like Senator Holly Hughes is one of the finest advocates for the community, and yet her own party has done her in. Having seen what she has done, particularly in country areas by way of the Country Autism Network that she founded, her great advocacy for people who are in receipt of the NDIS, it is just such a concern to me that we lose such a brilliant woman as Senator Holly Hughes from the Parliament, because at the end of the day, very few people can achieve what she has achieved on behalf of the people of New South Wales and indeed Australia.
Well, I am going to reach out to Senator Holly Hughes, I'm sure in a very short while, because I'd love to have her on the program, and I'm sure she'll probably shed more light on the subject.
I can honestly say in the Parliament, no one knows more about autism or the needs and interests of those with a disability than Senator Holly Hughes. In the community, it's certainly Grace Farver OAM, who founded the Autism Advisory and Support Service out at Liverpool. And these are the inspirational people that you get to meet along the way and help a bit, like Grace. But Grace is just one of the most amazing and extraordinary people I've ever met. To think that, motivated because she has, I should say, two boys, lovely boys with autism, and she saw the gap that there was no support services back in the early 2000s to support these kids. So she formed her own clubhouse. Little did she realise that it would go national. She'd have a national support hotline, as well as a library service where parents can come from across the state to borrow things that help their kids, get constant advice from her and her fellow volunteers. Just extraordinary.
And it's the extraordinary people that set themselves apart through the great work that they do.
Exactly. The more work you do, the more, I think, work you receive. And it's those women who I've just mentioned. They go under the radar. Some criticise them because they only see a small portion of what they do. They don't look at the holistic approach and see, well, they're doing great work there, so they might have a different political view on that. But unfortunately, I think some people seek to hate and persecute certain politicians because of one view, but they don't look at that holistic approach.
Well, being in local government for 13 and a bit years, I've noticed it firsthand that sometimes people tend to put self-interest before the community, and it doesn't matter what people say, it's what they do.
That's true. Unfortunately, there are people in local government that don't necessarily sit there for the right reasons. You often get people who are using it as a stepping stone to Parliament. You often get people who are just so ideologically drawn that regardless of what their community wants, they will go with what they want or their ego or their vested interest. And that concerns me greatly. And, to see block voting along party lines, to see people attacked by those parties because they had a different opinion has been very scary, but also disheartening.
And you see some of the behaviour that goes on in Parliament. And if we are trying to set a good example to the young people, that's where they should be setting good examples, especially if they've got children in the gallery or watching it from home for a school assignment. And I feel that in that sense we're letting them down.
I'd have to agree with that. That yes, certain elected representatives at council level and parliamentary level do let the community down by their behaviour in the chamber. Now, that does bring the credibility and the trust down. Yes, people do reveal themselves and the true selves on how they vote, how they speak to people, and how they constantly conduct themselves in public.
So, having been awarded the Order of Australia Medal for your service, how did this recognition influence your community work?
The Order of Australia being awarded is something that I'll never still really accept because it was just such a shock. But at the time, I was dealing with, and still today, serious issues of drug and alcohol abuse, suicide, and mental health issues. So that Order of Australia, while it was for my service to those issues and those organisations that I served in, it actually was a breaking point because I think it helped break the stigma of those issues and acknowledged and recognised it. And we're talking about, early 2000s when it was very taboo to talk about mental health. It was very taboo to talk about suicide. It was very taboo to talk about domestic violence. And so I think it's a recognition to all those people that I got to meet and help. But it was also special to me because at that time, my mother and my grandmother before me had been awarded the Order of Australia. And then since then, my aunt and my uncle too. So that, I think, was a very sentimental consideration. But I consider it one of the greatest honours and something that I'll always cherish.
It really is a significant recognition. And how old were you when you received it?
So it was 2004. So I was the youngest that year in the Queen's Birthday Honours list.
21 years ago. Wow. Very well deserved. Considering your involvement in other things, especially the Australian Gynecological Cancer Foundation and Cure the Future Foundation, Vincent, what drives your commitment to health-related causes?
So as a two-time survivor of cancer, and as I said earlier, I was given 6 weeks to live in 1999. I realise what patients go through and I realise what families and loved ones and friends go through. So during my hospital stay, I noticed the lack of money for research for women's cancers and the lack of money for stem cell research. So it was actually Marie Ficara and Diane Langmack that got me involved with the Australian Gynecological Cancer Foundation. And then Di Langmack again with the Cure the Future Foundation, which is primarily concerned with stem cell research. I was saved, my life was saved by a bone marrow stem cell transplant. Unfortunately, women's cancers receive less money than practically every other cancer. Yes, breast cancer is finally receiving the funding that it deserves, but gynecological cancer, which is a silent killer, is not receiving the money it should, particularly by federal governments and state governments. So it is so important for the community to care about their sisters, their mothers, their aunts, their grandmothers, and help raise money, but also raise awareness of the testing requirements. When it comes to stem cell research, it's the next lifesaver. In other countries, people are receiving stem cell therapy for dementia, for arthritis, for quadriplegia. And so it is something that I think we need to look very strongly at and advocate for funding because it's going to be the future. And I think there's nothing sadder than seeing people die of MN, MS, cancer, but dementia particularly, when you see someone just go downhill in front of you. I think it's just so important.
Yeah, and it's another thing that I admire about you, that you see something that needs to be called out, and you do.
Well, I was taught by my mother and grandmother that it's so important never just to talk, act. And by sitting there, you're being hypocritical, and that if you want to change something, you've got to change it yourself. So raising money for those brilliant charities, be it Australian Gynecological Cancer Foundation, be it Cure the Future, or be it for the numerous refuges, safe houses, emergency centres that I've helped, I realise it's just so important because they're the forefront and hearts of souls of our community. They're dealing with some of the most significant issues in our community. And unless we support them, there's very little money for them. They've been let down by all levels of government. So we need to fill that gap, unfortunately. they're the forefront and hearts of souls of our community. They're dealing with some of the most significant issues in our community. And unless we support them, there's very little money for them. They've been let down by all levels of government. So we need to fill that gap, unfortunately.
Yes, absolutely, Vince. And that's always going to be a challenge. And speaking of challenges, that leads me to the next question. So you mentioned your battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma during your initial council campaign. How did this personal challenge shape your perspective on community service?
Well, back in 1999, my first election, when I was diagnosed, I think I went into shock, and there was no way in hell that I was going to accept that I'd die within 6 weeks. I got a brilliant specialist by the name of Naomi McKinley, and while she acknowledged that it was going to be a very hard fight and a new regime of chemo and radio, I got there in the end. It came back a year later, same, had to do it all again and have a bone marrow stem cell transplant. I think what got me through that was having such family and friends that were just so devoted to being by my side, keeping me interested. But at the same time, I kept active. Even though I was bedridden in hospital, I ran a fundraiser for the cancer ward at Royal North Shore Hospital that I was allowed to go to at the Waterview restaurant down at Miller's Point or wherever it is. I think always trying to inspire to look positively on everything is the way to go. But what will always guide me is what has been instilled in me by my grandmother, by my mother, service above self.
And to be resilient and not give up.
Exactly. You're going to get some knocks in life, but you've just got to brush yourself off and get back up. If one door closes, you bang on another. And that is something, you know, when I'm asked to go and speak to students at schools and universities, I say, as an example, an HSC or a first year university result that's not good doesn't mean that's going to adversely affect your whole future. You've just got to keep knocking on doors. You've just got to keep working hard and you'll get through.
Really, there's no such thing as a failure if you just keep coming back, because eventually
you achieve. If you keep going, you do achieve. And if you work hard, you'll get what you want.
And that's all it is. The people who really fail are the ones that didn't keep going.
Yeah, unfortunately, some people do give up and have a very sad life and don't succeed and go and spiral and end up in dreadful situations where often they will need a helping hand up. And we are a compassionate society and we do need to have that safety net and help people who don't necessarily succeed or can't because of physical or mental disability.
And there is some hope, especially those who want to belong. Now, recognising your role on the Board of Directors for Netball New South Wales, how do you see sports as a vehicle for community building? And what advice do you have for integrating sports initiatives to strengthen community ties?
So sport has been very important to my family. My grandmother was a brilliant swimmer and a brilliant surfer. She was the first woman ever to surf at Dee Why Beach. She worked hard. She was a member of the Dee Why Ladies Amateur Swimming Club, the oldest ladies swimming club in Australia, based out of Rockpool since 1922. And she, with her dear friend Isa Y, embodies OAM, travelled the world together. They helped bring New South Wales men's and women's swimming together. And my mother, similarly, helped establish Mundaring Women's Basketball, now Mundaring Netball Association. Now, I've seen firsthand how sport can help people. It's an equaliser. It can give leadership skills. It can prevent poor mental health. It increases fitness, but it also increases mental health. And I just think it is so important. And I've seen people who have been in the worst situations, and I've seen Nan and Mum use sport to bring those people out of dreadful situations and reach the top. And that is something that's inspired me. And as a director of Netball New South Wales, a very proud director, I must say, I see some inspirational people practically every week. And I think sport is just so important because it teaches so many life skills, particularly team leadership skills and team working skills for those sports that are team-based. I think it's a great thing.
I have to agree with you on that one. Sport is really important because it really does, apart from just having the team value, the spirit, it gives you something to look forward to.
Sport definitely inspires people, whether you're participating or you're a supporter and watching it. It gives like a tribal almost, family orientated. I look at whenever I go to the National Rugby League and I see these people who are such devoted fans, and that is their great joy to be there. That's their team. It's if it's their family, and it's just something great to see. It gives them something to live for, someone to support, someone to look up to, and I just think it's wonderful.
The sense of belonging.
Yeah, belonging is just so important. Our tribe.
And that is why it's important to have these conversations, to do what we do, and let everybody know that they're not alone. They belong somewhere.
It is belonging and being part of a community, a team, is just so important because you have that support, you have that recognition, and you have the love and affection of others. And that, I think, is something that is the best thing that anyone can ever want. Support, love, affection.
Support, love and affection. I love that. I think we've spoken on quite a few topics and to great extent on some of them as well. I just want to say thank you very much. Thank you so much for everything that you do and for our listeners to get a better understanding of what goes on. So thank you very much for sharing with us your journey and hopefully giving a lot more people out there some hope.
And one thing I do want to say strongly is, Leon, you have served your community as a counsellor for Waverley with great distinction, great selflessness. You are someone I greatly admire, I cherish as a friend, and I thank you for all that you've done, for the many people you've helped, and please consider coming back to either local government or other levels of government because people like you are desperately needed. The sincere, the selfless and the genuine.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the amazing feedback. It does mean a lot to me to hear that, and not just hear that, but also hear it from someone like yourself. Vince, thank you very much for that, and I look forward to seeing you continue to grow and evolve as you have been. Thank you so much for everything.
Thanks, Leon.
And that brings us to the end of another powerful episode of Engaging Conversations. A heartfelt thank you to Vincent De Luca OAM for sharing his journey of service and resilience, as well as his honest insights into the gaps in our systems that we need to fill. What Vincent reminds us is that true advocacy isn't just about power, it's about people. And real change often starts with those willing to stand alone before others join them. Whether it's challenging policy, supporting a neighbour, or simply showing up, it all matters. The response to recent episodes continues to grow, with more listeners tuning in from across Australia and around the world. And as we prepare to take engaging conversations deeper into local communities, it's clear that people are not only listening, they're engaging, reflecting, and stepping up. Next week, I'm joined by Trudy McDonald, award-winning keynote speaker, performance coach, and one of Australia's leading voices in leadership, culture, and business performance. Together, we'll explore practical, forward-thinking strategies to help businesses, especially those in high-growth regional areas like Lake Macquarie, Newcastle, and the Hunter, better attract, engage, and retain the next generation of professionals. This is an episode you'll want to listen to from start to finish, because the insights Trudy shares are just that good. And as always, thank you to our sponsors for their ongoing support, and to all of you, our guests, listeners, and the community for continuing to walk with us on this journey. I'm Leon Goldsman. Until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and let's keep building the kind of communities we all want together.